Hey, welcome! Today we are diving into one of the most influential and, one of the most controversial texts in all of Indian history. It's called the Manusmriti. And get this, it was an ancient code that tried to regulate literally everything in society, from what you could eat to who you could marry. So, let's unpack it.
Just think about that for a second. A single book that tells you your social class, your job, who you're going to marry, what you can eat, and even what laws apply to you. That was the huge ambition of the Manusmriti. It was meant to be a perfect blueprint for a perfectly ordered and, as we'll see, a deeply hierarchical society.
So what exactly is this thing? Well, the Manusmriti, which translates to the laws of Manu, doesn't just present itself as a book of good ideas. Nope, it's framed as a divine code. The origin story is that the creator god, Brahma, handed down these laws to a sage named Manu, who is basically the mythical first man, as a guide for all of humanity. So it wasn't just a law book, it was meant to be the ultimate instruction manual for life itself.
And the scale of it is pretty staggering. We're talking about an ancient Sanskrit text, a cornerstone of what are called the Dharmashastras. It's got 12 chapters and more than 2,600 verses. But all of that writing, every single rule, was designed to establish one single, all-important concept: Dharma.
And you've got to understand Dharma to understand any of this. It's not just law, and it's not just religion. It's this massive, all-encompassing idea of cosmic order, of your specific social duty, of personal righteousness, basically the fundamentally correct way to live your life. The entire social structure we're about to look at is built on top of this one idea. So, how did the Manusmriti use this idea of Dharma to actually build a society? Well, it laid out a blueprint with two core systems. You have the Varnas, which organize society itself, and then the Ashramas, which organize an individual's life within that society. Put them together, and you get a complete and very rigid framework for everything.
Okay, first up, the Varna system, which you might know better as the caste system. According to the text, society is split into 4 divinely created groups. At the very top, you have the Brahmanas, the priests, the scholars. Right below them are the Kshatriyas, the rulers and warriors. Then come the Vaishyas, who handle all the commerce and farming. And at the bottom are the Shudras, whose job it was to do the labor and serve the other 3 classes. Everyone had a very specific and very fixed role to play.
Now, alongside that social pyramid, the text lays out 4 ideal stages of life, or ashramas. Now, this was primarily for men in the top 3 castes. The idea was you'd start as a student, learning and living a disciplined life. Then you'd become a householder, get married, have a family, do your job. Much later in life, you could retire to the forest to meditate. And finally, you could renounce everything, all worldly ties, to seek spiritual liberation or moksha. It's a very structured path from worldly responsibility to spiritual freedom.
But this is where we have to stop and ask a really critical question. Was this ideal society ideal for everybody? Because when you look at the text's rules on gender and how its justice system worked, you start to see a very, very different picture, one that is anything but equal.
This line, which is a paraphrase from the 5th chapter, is probably one of the most famous and, honestly, one of the most chilling parts of the text. It lays it out in no uncertain terms. A woman is to be dependent on a male relative her entire life. First her father, then her husband, then her sons. Independence, autonomy, it just wasn't part of the plan.
And this really shows you the deep contradiction at the heart of the text. Because on one hand, women were supposed to be honored and protected. But on the other, they were completely denied any real agency. They were expected to be totally obedient, remarriage for widows was frowned upon, and their word in legal matters was literally considered less reliable than a man's.
This inequality was also written directly into the law. Justice was not blind here, not even close. The punishment you received depended entirely on who you were. Just look at this example. If a Shudra insulted a Brahmana, the prescribed punishment was to have their tongue cut out. But if a Brahmana committed a sin, they'd get a much, much lighter penance. The law itself was a tool to keep the hierarchy in place.
So, all of this brings us to the Manusmriti's modern legacy. Why is this ancient text still sparking such intense arguments today? Well, it's because it has been both revered as a source of incredible wisdom and absolutely reviled as a tool of oppression. And that conflict is still very much alive.
And if there's one year that captures this conflict perfectly, it's 1927. This was the year that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a brilliant social reformer and the main architect of India's constitution, publicly burned a copy of the Manusmriti. It was this hugely powerful symbolic act, condemning the text as a document that justified centuries of discrimination and oppression.
So here you have it, the two sides of its legacy, right next to each other. For some, it's a foundational guide to Hindu law and ethics, a source of cultural wisdom. For others, it's torn apart for its oppressive caste system, its deep misogyny, and for giving a kind of divine permission slip for systemic inequality.
So in the end, there's no simple takeaway here. The Manusmriti is, without a doubt, one of the most pivotal texts in Indian intellectual history. But it is also, without question, one of the most polarizing. It gives us a window into an ancient worldview, for sure, but its ideas still cast a very long shadow over society today.
And that really leaves us with a profound final question. The whole debate over the Manusmriti is really about something much bigger. How does any society figure out how to balance its ancient traditions with its modern commitments to equality and justice? It's a huge challenge, one that so many cultures are grappling with, and there are definitely no easy answers. It's something we're thinking about. Thanks so much for joining me.